All right, everyone, warm up those brains. It's time for the next episode, number 29 of the Get More Smarter podcast. I'm Jason Bane.
And I'm Alan Bunny Pants Franklin.
I don't know what that means. It really threw me off. This week on the...
Okay, I'll explain. It's no problem. Bunny Pants was actually George W. Bush's nickname in college. And you can figure out why on your own time, but it's true. Look it up.
Anyway, this week on the Get More Smarter podcast, we discussed Cory Gardner's impeachment debacle.
Debacle.
Yeah. A wacky vacancy committee underscores Republican troubles in 2020. And House Majority Leader Alec Garnett joins us again for another legislative update from under the Gold Dome. All right, we're excited to bring back once again our favorite House Majority Leader, Alec Garnett, to let us know what's going on under the Gold Dome. Welcome back, Representative.
Hey, team. I'm super excited to be back. I'm getting a ton of great feedback on our conversations and our podcast, so I'm glad that whenever I get the invite from Ethan, that maybe I get another week to keep going. I haven't screwed up yet.
Cool. Yeah, we'll keep going. You're the only one here that knows what they're talking about, so
I'll vouch for that.
Yeah, we'll keep going as long as you'll have us. Before we get into the legislative stuff, let me ask you: the ballots for Colorado's presidential primary are going out this week. Are you starting to hear more from campaigns pushing you to get involved or take a position?
I have. Lots of campaigns are reaching out, which I think is kind of funny because I can't really imagine that anyone cares what a state rep has to say about the presidential. So yes, lots of people are reaching out. It was funny today. I've been a little disturbed by how ineffective the DNC has been. So when asked today by press if I was supporting anyone, I said no, but I'm very frustrated with the DNC. So I know that's
how so?
Well, I've been frustrated by, I think, the fact that they have had a heavier hand in the debate structure than I've ever seen before.
Okay.
And so now we're kind of in a place where I keep hearing from people that they don't know what they're going to do. I frankly don't know what I'm going to do. I've never been in this place before where I need like Iowa and New Hampshire to guide me. I don't need Iowa and New Hampshire to guide me. So I feel like they had a heavy hand in picking and choosing who was going to be on the debate stage. I think that what happened in Iowa, I thought was unfortunate and kind of led us off to a bad start. And then Perez kind of came in and just sort of pointed the finger at Iowa instead of trying to solve the problem, much of which was created by the fact that state parties have to use this company. So I don't know. I've been just frustrated that the Democrats seem to be off message and seem to be kind of fumbling a little bit out of the gate when this should be just a slam dunk.
We're not going to ask who you support because, as you said, you haven't made that decision anyway, but we talked earlier about who seems to be the front runner to win Colorado. It seems to us that it's probably between Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren. Does it look that way to you?
I think so. I think in the end, this comes down to Bloomberg and Bernie.
In Colorado or nationally?
I think nationally it's Bloomberg or Bernie. I think that in Colorado, I think it's probably between I don't know if it's that much. I think Bernie for sure. I think the question then is, how does Elizabeth do over the next couple of weeks? Ballots are being mailed out now. Elizabeth has had great showings when she's been here. I think I've been really impressed with how her campaign started and where it was in the fall. It's just kind of, I think she's made a few calculated mistakes and she's kind of fallen back a little bit. But, can she rebound? I think the answer is yes, she definitely can. And Colorado might be the place to do it, or Super Tuesday might be the place to do it. But no one has certainly been spending more than Bloomberg here in Colorado. Bloomberg's assembled, I would say, an all-star cast of staff here in Colorado. And so I wouldn't be surprised if Bloomberg did well in Colorado as well.
Oh, all right. See, that's what I think that may happen too. Alan's not so sure. But let's get some.
Alan, what? Well, this is good. Alan, what do you think?
Well, I have considered this to be a race between Bernie and Warren for some time, but there's an interesting dynamic now where it seems like Bernie is consolidating support from Warren voters who are kind of like making their choice between the two progressive candidates. With respect to Bloomberg, there's no question that he's spending unprecedented, extraordinary amounts of money, and we're going to have to see how that actually manifests in terms of measurable support at the polls.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think Bloomberg's the new Biden. And I think that I think that the mistake, well, I'm not going to get into again, I'm like the lowly state rep. Like no one really cares what I think about all this stuff, but super interesting. And it's super interesting. And I do think that, I think we should pour one out for Michael Bennett, and say, thank you for doing what's right, and thank you for running. And I don't think it's going to last much longer, but I certainly have appreciated how hard and his persistence and how long he's gone through all of this, because he's a voice that's just been washed out by the process, and that's unfortunate.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Before we get to some specific questions about the legislature, take us through more of a broader view this week. What are the big storylines as you see them under the Gold Dome right now?
Yeah, I think the big storylines are where the Democrats are continuing to focus in on reducing healthcare costs for Coloradans. One of the major legs of that stool is prescription drug transparency, which is a piece of legislation that's been run, I think, 4 years in a row, but has a great chance of finally being signed into law this year. Representative Dominique Jackson and Representative Dylan Roberts are the sponsors of that in the House this year. And I think there's two ways that they're going to really try to get at this. One is showing some transparency and requiring companies to disclose why and when prices go up by a certain percentage. And so I think what people get really frustrated about is no one understands how patents work. No one understands the play between name brand and generics.
Right.
All they understand is that costs are too high, and they want their costs to go down. And so another piece of this is the rebates that come down from the manufacturers but rarely make it into the pocket of the consumers. And so that will be kind of the direct link of how to reduce costs going forward. So this is a really important conversation. Obviously, I think of all of the costs that consumers feel, pharmaceutical costs is one of the highest. So that bill will be in committee, I think on Wednesday, but the point is the conversation will continue. The House is looking at the bill that we've been following on this podcast for the last couple of weeks. Will be on the floor this week around allowing state workers to collectively bargain, which is a really big deal and something that we've talked about at length here. And it's a fight that's been going on for 12 years now. And then a conversation that it doesn't have a huge policy implications, but a lot of importance symbolically and to many communities in Colorado is changing the name of Columbus Day to Mother Cabrini. Mother Cabrini?
It seems like I can't even remember a time when we weren't talking about this at some point.
Right. I think. Yeah. So what I would say to all of our listeners, right, is it's a different tack this year. It's going to be changed to Mother Cabrini, and it's going to get out of the House. But the question is, what does the Senate do with it? Remember last year, it was to turn it into Colorado Day, not Mother Cabrini Day. And it made it out of the House, and then it died unanimously. Every Democrat on the committee also voted with Republicans to kill the bill in the Senate in the first committee. So that will be what to watch for, is once this bill makes it into the Senate, what happens in that first committee.
And you think it has a pretty good chance that we might finally be done with that this session?
Jason, it's such a good. No, I don't think so. I don't think it. I don't think it. This is a really big deal to Pueblo, right? Pueblo was the first city in the entire country to create Columbus Day.
Yeah,
they have one of the oldest chapters of.
Columbus landed here, I think, right?
Well, yeah, of this
in Pueblo.
Yeah, I don't know. There's a very strong Italian community in
Right.
Pueblo that's been adamantly against the legislature changing Columbus Day. So Columbus Day would still remain a federal holiday. We would just be changing the state holiday. So I think it all comes down to whether or not Pueblo is to a place where they're ready to recognize another Italian.
Well, key to that question, I believe, is Representative Bree Buentello. Isn't that right?
I think really the key will be where is the Senate president.
Yeah. Okay.
Leroy Garcia. Yeah.
This week, we're going to see some Republican mainstay bills get killed off in committee. A couple of them, the Parents' Bill of Rights, House Bill 1144, and Fundamental Family Rights in Colorado, House Bill 1063. These seem very familiar. What's the difference and what's the point of this?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is. I think we could dub this week Hate Week in the House, where we will be taking up bills that are really negative bills that are targeted at the LGBTQ community, that are targeted at our trans youth community, and so these bills will be going to State Affairs on Thursday, and my bet is after a fair hearing that they don't make it out, because they really are trying to kind of turn the clock backwards. Colorado is one of the leading states in terms of LGBTQ rights, and so the idea of the Parents' Bill of Rights, it just is going to make it harder for our youth to seek the physical and mental health care services that they need. There's another bill around protection of minors from mutilation and sterilization, which is directly targeted at making it a Class 3 felony to help our trans youth go through gender affirmation care. And so we're just in this place where Republicans want to, act like this is the 1950s, and it's hateful and it's hurtful. And, this is why majorities matter. And the Democrats are going to hopefully I know they will stand up on Thursday and make sure that these bills don't make it out of committee.
One in particular is House Bill 20-1272, the Colorado Natural Marriage and Adoption Act. We've got a lot of kids out there right now who have been adopted by loving same-sex couples, and this is a bill that essentially says that those relationships are immoral. I mean, it just seems like a really audaciously discriminatory. We know it's not going to go anywhere, but what's the political message Republicans are trying to send with this?
I don't know. I don't get it. And this is not where Colorado is at in 2020. I mean, that bill invalidates same-sex marriages, which I actually officiated one 2 weeks ago. It's completely absurd.
It's outrageous.
These bills have a place in even the legislative discussion underneath the Gold Dome. And it just shows how, I think, out of touch the GOP is with where Coloradans are at, and in a state that, many people thought was purple because of messages like this, and because these are the things that the GOP wants to lead on. Democrats continue to win huge majorities every November.
Yeah.
Another one of those turn back the clock bills that you had a lot to do with, the red flag legislation last year. There's a bill, House Bill 1271, to repeal the red flag law and amend the 72-hour hold for dangerous weapons. Is this gonna go anywhere, do you think, or is this pretty much dead along party lines?
Yeah, I don't think this is going to go anywhere. I mean, there's a couple things that are a problem here. One, we worked really hard on putting in place an extremist protection order, a red flag bill that allows family members and law enforcement to petition a court to help remove firearms from somebody who's deemed a threat to themselves or others. And it's working. It's working. The Larimer County Sheriff, who was a opponent of the legislation, went on Facebook and said that it worked in the case where his deputies filed an ERPO against somebody who was going to be released from jail, who had been threatening a mass casualty event, and they wanted to make sure that they couldn't get a firearm once they were let out of jail, and it worked. And then somebody abused it in Larimer County by, trying to move forward on one when she wasn't a valid petitioner. Yep. And sure enough, like we said, there are ways. One, a judge is never going to allow that to move forward, and two, you can punish the person for knowingly coming forward with an invalid ERPO. So the point is, it's working. It's helping save lives. It can't be abused. And other states across the country are actually using Colorado's bill as a model because we allow the respondent to get legal representation. So it's been successful so far, and it's something that we're really proud of here. But, the Republicans, like they did in 2014 and every year since then, when Democrats step up and represent the people of Colorado by trying to make our community safer and pass laws around gun safety legislation, every year after that, Republicans run bills to repeal those laws that made it through the legislature and then were signed by the governor. And so this is just the next iteration of that. And also they change the threshold for the 72-hour mental health hold, which actually doesn't do anything to protect our communities, because if law enforcement takes somebody in on what they call an M1 hold, where you are a threat to hurting yourself or people around you, and so therefore they just take you to the hospital, and the hospital can hold you for up to 72 hours. Well, the problem is our hospitals don't have enough beds. They can't be our mental health centers. Right. They can't deliver the mental health services that our communities need. And I talked to 2 sheriffs this week who said, changing this threshold will do nothing. It will just have people go to the hospital and get kicked back out onto the street again without actually solving the problem. And if they want to go back and get a firearm to inflict harm on themselves or others, they can still do that. So it really isn't a solution, but I'm not surprised, because this is kind of the classic bill in their playbook, and I can't imagine it gets out of committee.
The State Affairs Committee is traditionally known as the kill committee. Is there a particular reason that committee ended up being the one where bad bills go to die? Is there any real logic to that, or that's just kind of how it happened?
Yeah, I don't know the history on state affairs in particular, but I think there's a couple things that I think our listeners should know. One, majorities absolutely matter, because we're about to talk about some bills that are archaic, that are discriminatory, that are hurtful. And if the Democrats weren't in charge of the gavels in these committees, these bills would be making it out and could be signed into law. And I think that should sort of scare Coloradans and should scare voters.
Absolutely.
But we have the gavel amendment, which is one of the reasons that our legislature works really well, which means every bill that gets introduced has to have a hearing where witnesses can testify and there's an up or down vote. And so for some of these bills that are really, really bad, you have to have a place to send them where they can, you meet the gavel amendment requirements, where there's a hearing and witnesses can testify and there's an up or down vote, but you're pretty certain that it's not going to align with the majority of the members. But because of the gavel amendment, you have to create a committee in each chamber. Republicans do it, Democrats do it, where bills that are so far out of line with your views of the world can go, but probably not make it out.
But people can still testify and say, this is why I think this makes sense, and you still have that forum and that opportunity.
And it's always fair. And so, even though people call it the kill committee and some people get frustrated that bills get sent there, the point is, if you can make a compelling argument for why this bill should get voted out, you have that opportunity, and you have the opportunity to get the bill to the floor. But the point is, a lot of these bills that we're about to go through, there is no compelling argument other than they are just grounded in a discriminatory view of the world that really only appeals to a very narrow slice of the Colorado population.
Right. Yep.
Let me ask you about another bill that I noticed that I thought was interesting for a different reason. Some Republicans have proposed a 22-week abortion ban, but that is already working its way through the system to be a ballot measure. Why are they introducing legislation to do the same thing?
I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that ballot measures like these have been defeated in Colorado time and time and time again. Usually when ballot measures are making their way through the title board and on their way to the ballot, raising their profile in an unsuccessful way in the legislature is not the best way of moving forward, but I think your guess is as good as mine.
So maybe they're just, I don't know. I have no idea why they're doing it.
I don't know either. But I think the thing about a lot of these bills that's like kind of scary to me is that not only are you making it like a felony to help kind of meet the healthcare needs of our trans youth, but they're like making it like punishable by 12 years in prison and a $750,000 fine. In terms of that, there's a born alive child physician relationship bill that's coming forward where, doctors who fail to comply also get hit with a class 3 felony and a $100,000 fine. These are the same physicians who I think the majority of people believe should be building the relationship up with their patients and helping them make the best healthcare choices that they can. So, not only are they mean and discriminatory, but you're trying to sort of punish professionals in the field for trying to meet the needs of their patients. So I don't know. It does kind of make you sad and depressed when you start going through it, that this is the state of some of the work that we have to do under the Gold Dome. Luckily, it's just not stuff that's going to make it hopefully into the state statute books.
Well, I think your point about majorities matter, elections matter is well taken, and especially in 2020 should be remembered.
The other way to look at that is we're only one election away from disaster.
Disaster, I know. And it is, for everyone listening, it should be motivation to go knock some extra doors, to go make a few more phone calls. The people that you put in charge here at the Capitol, while we don't, do a lot of press on some of these ideas that float around down here, if you're right, if one election goes the wrong way, then we're in a completely different scenario.
Let me ask you one more thing. There are a couple of House vacancies that have been filled recently, one by Democrats, one by Republicans. Does that impede or create a problem for how the legislature is moving forward when you get these people coming in that need to be brought up to speed on all this stuff all at once, or is it pretty seamless?
Yeah, it's a case by case basis. I think it's really hard on the individual coming in. This is the second session of the 72nd General Assembly. So it's not even like this was last year, right, where we just, started going. Everyone's been at this a year already. Relationships are formed. Committee relationships are formed. People are already kind of just chugging along. And it can be really hard for the member that's coming in. So we actually talked about this today. I think I'm going to request with the minority leader to set up a bipartisan legislative training for all of the new members so that our staffs can spend a couple hours with everybody trying to give them the lay of the land. Because after every election, when a new group of legislators comes in, they get this 3-week crash course in how the legislative process works. But when you come in on a vacancy committee, you don't get that opportunity. So we're going to try to carve that out so they have at least a little bit of training for the remainder of this session. And then there's a lot of talk down here about, vacancy committees. Are they fair? Are they not fair? And in my opinion, they're just part of the process. And no system's perfect, and I don't know if there's a better system out there.
Yeah, no, I think that's true. You've got to fill the positions one way or the other.
Right.
And this might not be the best way to do it, but I don't know that I've seen a proposal that makes any more sense, frankly. And anything else we need to be looking out for down there this week?
No, death penalty will be up in the House next week. And other than that, there's a lot of other stuff, a lot of news about family medical leave, which we've been talking about, public option, which we've been talking about. I think all of those are a couple weeks away. Family probably before public option, but keep your eyes out for those things, and when they come up, we can dig in to the details.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, House Majority Leader Alec Garnett. Thanks for joining us once again.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure to be on.
Let's get things started with perhaps our oldest jingle, Finding Cory.
Finding Cory.
Unless you've been doing something else, you're probably aware that impeachment, the vote happened last week in the Senate. President Trump was acquitted on both charges. Only Senator Mitt Romney voted yes as a Republican on one of the charges. Our own Colorado Senator Cory Gardner voted to acquit President Trump, as we all knew he would. But then he went around and had to try to explain it, and whoo boy.
No, it really has not gone well for him in the post-vote press tour. He's been having to answer questions. Well, frankly, a lot of cases, it's the same basic question that he's been asked ever since this scandal broke last October. Is it appropriate for the president to pressure a foreign government to help him with domestic politics? And Cory, again, couldn't answer this. In multiple interviews, everybody's been trying to get it from him, get it out of him, and there's just no doing it. And he, at this point, I don't think he's going to come up with a better answer. He's kind of boxed in where he's got to stick with this rote defense of the president that doesn't pass minimal scrutiny. I mean, you ask a couple of basic questions about his defense of Trump and it falls apart. He has to start answering questions other than the one that he was asked.
He very much seems like he's reached the point where he's like, look, this was, he won't say it, but look, you and I both know that my reason for acquittal is horseshit, but that's where I am, and that's what I'm sticking with. And he's almost sort of like not even trying to say
It's like he's not completely unique in this regard either. There was an interview this weekend with Senator Lindsey Graham, specifically about the termination of Lieutenant Colonel Vindman, who was the National Security Council official who testified against Trump during the impeachment trial. And really, Lindsey Graham's answers to the questions about Vindman were incoherent. He just kept going back to these completely discredited conspiracy theories about different parts of the government being part of a conspiracy to get Trump, and just based on the fact that supposedly happened, that obviously it was necessary to get rid of Vindman as someone whose political loyalties were in question. And I mean, it was just a disastrous interview, and it just shows Lindsey Graham, Cory Gardner, all of these guys, they don't have good answers for this. And every time they go on camera to give answers, it looks terrible.
We saw this on Thursday when Gardner finally stood up on the Senate floor and spoke about an hour before the vote was called. He spoke and sort of tried to explain his reason for eventually voting for acquittal. He talked about Federalist 78 and Federalist 34, whichever one it is. And it was a lot of gibberish.
Well, I don't think he was actually trying to persuade anyone. He had to speak for a couple of minutes. Well, he didn't have to, but he chose to speak for a couple of minutes. And this is what he decided to say.
But for a pretty big, historically important speech, this was pretty dumb.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't think it's going to be remembered in the annals of great Senate speeches. No. As a matter of fact, this whole thing has been really bad for Cory Gardner. He's been forced to just basically admit that he never had any principles going into this to uphold.
Let's listen to a little section of this speech he had on the Senate floor, particularly where we'll start where he starts talking about Federalist 78.
In Federalist 78, Hamilton wrote, "Liberty can have nothing to fear from the judiciary alone, but would have everything to fear from its union with either of the other departments. If the House managers prevail, the House would have destroyed our constitutional balance, declaring itself the arbiter of constitutional rights, and conscripting the Chief Justice to do it." To be clear, the executive branch is not immune from legislative oversight or impeachment and trial.
What's baffling to me about this is here he is essentially saying, I'm contradicting my own argument, but the executive branch is not immune from legislative oversight or impeachment or trial, but it is today.
Well, no, that's right. I mean, it was like, it's like, yes, we understand that all of this could happen, but we're just not going to do it. Look, and in these subsequent interviews, Cory Gardner has been forced to just dance around the very plain determination by everybody who's looked at this that, yes, this was against the law. What the president did was unambiguously illegal, but he's never been able to cop to that. I mean, they say, look, this was illegal. Everybody says this was illegal. Do you think it was even morally okay? And he won't even answer that. So
no, and it's what was interesting to me and heartening in a way is that a lot of media outlets piled on to Gardner for his nonsensical explanations of this. The Denver Post wrote an editorial in which they flat write, quote, "Coloradans deserve better than Cory Gardner." That's obviously a departure from where that paper had been in past years.
Yeah.
But I don't think the point is that he's not fooling anybody anymore.
No, that's right. The shine has come off of all these things. When he ran in 2014, he was able to present himself however he wanted. He could say whatever he wanted to say to different segments of the electorate to get their votes. Can't do that 6 years later when he's got an actual record that he has to run for re-election on. All of these places where he's made decisions that he can't take back, made statements that he can't take back. There's no coming back from this.
We'll discuss more of some of Gardner's media tour in a new segment here in a bit. But I wanted to ask you something that I thought was interesting. Right after the impeachment trial news came out, I saw it in the Washington Post that two of the largest Democratic super PACs are preparing to target 3 vulnerable Republican senators after they each voted to acquit Trump. Susan Collins of Maine, Martha McSally of Arizona, and Tom Tillis of North Carolina. Notably not on that list is Cory Gardner.
Wow, think about that.
Does that mean he's falling off the top tier? It might.
The biggest danger that Cory Gardner has right now, because all of the news is bad. He's down by double digits in the polls. His favorability is in the dirt. It's worse than President Trump's. The thing that everybody's watching to see now is if national Republicans triage him out of the top tier of candidates, meaning they simply decide that resources are better spent on other races. And Cory Gardner is not the only linchpin to them holding the Senate
majority. We've seen evidence of that, as we talked about last week in the fundraising totals from the end of the 2019. Gardner barely raised $2 million. Martha McSally in Arizona doubled that, about $4 million. And that's a lot of donors either deciding on their own, which is unlikely, or being told or suggested to that here's where your money should go.
No, that's right. I will say that when you look at the decisions that Cory Gardner has been making recently, decision to stand by President Trump, despite the fact that Colorado politics have overwhelmingly turned against Trump and the Republican brand in general, it makes you wonder what his long-term plan actually is. And when you see fundraising in precipitous decline, which it appears to be for Gardner right now, you have to wonder, where is this leading? Is he going to even be competitive in 2020? Do they already expect Cory Gardner to lose? And if that's the case, is there any argument for another candidate replacing Cory Gardner as the Republican nominee for the U.S. Senate in 2020?
It's also not clear what Gardner really got out of covering this all up for Trump. Trump last week on Friday held a sort of celebration at the White House where he spoke extemporaneously for about an hour about all kinds of wacky shit. And he called out a couple dozen different Republicans and thanked them for their support. Gardner did not get mentioned.
He didn't get the love. I know. It's it's interesting. And I do believe that Trump considers Gardner to be one of his assets going into 2020. For whatever reason, over the course of the last few years, Gardner has endeared himself to Trump, to where he's on Trump's good list. The problem, of course, for Cory Gardner is politics here in Colorado have moved so strongly away from Trump and the Republican brand that this is really politically, I wouldn't call it suicidal, but it's very self-injurious to him. And
right.
And
that's what I mean about where's the benefit here? We learned over the weekend that Trump is coming to Colorado on February 20th. He's coming to Colorado Springs for a rally.
Yeah.
Gardner is supposed to be there.
The bottom line
it seems like this is sort of a thank you for Gardner, but maybe not. We've seen several emails from the Trump campaign since that announcement. They don't mention Gardner.
They don't even mention that Gardner's going to be there. I know. See, it's difficult to assess what this all really means. Cory Gardner is fighting a rear guard action to shore up the Republican base, who is actually very soft on support for Gardner. We've seen poll numbers that say that Cory Gardner would lose a Republican primary. We see poll numbers that show that Cory Gardner is less favorable.
In fairness,
than
I don't
Trump.
know to who he would lose a primary to.
I know that there's no real candidate on the bench, notwithstanding maybe somebody like Ken Buck or
right.
Scott Tipton. You start throwing these names out and then we kind of chuckle because it's like, nah.
Right. Well, even somebody like Tipton, we're wondering if he's going to make it out of a Republican primary for Congress.
But right. No, that's right. But the problem for Gardner is that he has no real friends. He's not considered to be a strong conservative by the conservative base. So he continuously has to try to prove himself to them. And as he does that, he alienates the rest of the electorate.
And in a general election campaign, I don't know what Gardner talks about other than, I really don't know what he says in terms of, here's why you should reelect me. I want to do What?
Well, actually, we can get to this later, but I think he says so. He had an interview with Fox 31. At the end of it, he's touting all of his things that literally just happened because Trump threw him a bone. He talks about the Space Force.
Yeah, right, which we had nothing to do with.
And the BLM move, which frankly has turned out to be a very dubious thing and was originally supported by Republicans and Democrats in Colorado, let's be fair.
No, I mean, if you look at the BLM relocation, maybe there's some people in Grand Junction that are happy about that. That's not a huge voter base. Maybe the Arkansas Valley Conduit gets you some people in southern Colorado. Not a ton of voters down there. You've got to win Metro Denver.
Right. I mean, these are little bullet points that like kind of dance around the edges of the things that voters will actually care about in the election. The real issues, of course, are the ones that Cory Gardner does not want to talk about. It's healthcare. It's Trump. You know, these are the things that they are going to be making all of their federal decisions on, much like they did in 2018 in Colorado, which was a referendum on Trump that Trump lost.
Right.
So.
Let's get back to some of the comments Gardner made in media interviews after his vote to acquit President Trump. We've got a new segment we're calling, Is This an Answer? Where we listen to answers that politicians give to questions from reporters and constituents. We've got a panel of expert judges, which is really just me and Alan, and we will let you know, is this an answer? So Ethan's queued up a couple of answers, or I should say responses, words, things that came out of people's mouth. In this case, Cory Gardner after impeachment. What are we starting with here?
Cory Gardner went in an interview with Colorado Public Radio and with Benta Birkeland. They talk and he's dancing around. And finally, at the end of the interview, Benta asks him a very direct question. Let's see how this goes.
Finally, Senator, I wanted to make sure listeners are clear on your conclusion on the underlying evidence in the impeachment trial. You feel it showed no improper behavior by the president, yes?
The question is whether or not you can use taxpayer dollars with impunity, or does the government have the ability to investigate corruption and how those taxpayer dollars are being spent? And that's a policy difference, and we should not be impeaching presidents based on policy differences.
Panel, is that an answer?
I mean, he was trying to answer. He was answering a different question.
I
than
guess
the one
it's an
that was
answer.
asked.
It's not an actual answer to her question. And it's not an answer that has anything to do with anything anybody has been talking about.
Right.
This was one of his post-impeachment talking points that I don't know where it came from. And I don't know whose idea it was that this is, maybe they tested this somewhere, but that to tell people that this was a disagreement on
Policy.
Spending tax dollar.
Right.
What?
I mean, it's absurd. Everybody knows what this was about. It was a political hit job on a political opponent, and it was an attempt to co-opt a foreign government to help him with a domestic political goal. I mean, all this other pablum, it just does nothing for him. It doesn't convince anybody.
So do you give him any percentage for this answer?
I will give him 10% for not just turning and running.
10%. Yeah, it's 10. He gave an answer, not to the question.
Right.
But he provided
provided words in response to a question.
Yeah, 10% seems fair.
Yeah.
What else we got?
All right, this is an interview that he did with Fox 31's Joe St. George. There are a few good ones from this interview because this is frankly the only time that Cory Gardner has been on camera or in front of any recording for months. So, panel, is this an answer?
Sir, here in Colorado, many Coloradans want to ask you questions in person about impeachment. You have not held a town hall, public town hall in our state for 2 years.
No, that's not true, Joe. We were just out in Fort Morgan this summer. We did a town hall. We were out. I know that may not count in terms of the front range.
Exactly. Front range, people in Denver.
Oh, so the people in Fort Morgan don't count?
No, people in Fort Morgan.
Well, that's where we did a town hall, Joe. If you're
people
going
in
to,
Douglas County,
you can't tell people of Colorado that they don't matter.
So why no town hall in Denver?
We have continued to do outreaches to meetings at businesses, town hall at local businesses, town halls.
Not public town halls, though. Will you have one?
You're
up for re-election.
Joe, there are many ways that we reach out to people, and we reach out to people via teletown halls in their places of work, in individual meetings. We do countless meetings. In fact, I'll be doing more tomorrow, reaching out to Coloradans. We receive thousands of pieces of mail, and I'm excited about that. So I know that the left really wants to push on this, and I'm just not going to take that talking point while we continue to do what's right for the people of Colorado.
What's your favorite color? I like bananas. I mean, it just makes no sense.
Look, Cory Gardner is really, really good at staying on message. The problem is that he stays
He has
on
no message.
Right. Well, I mean, he just keeps reciting this stuff past the point of absurdity.
Well, and he's first of all, he's flat out lying about that Fort Morgan thing. That was not a town hall.
Well, that's
It was an event that was published and promoted to the Republican County Party up there in Fort Morgan for them to come meet him. And it was not advertised to anybody else. It was certainly not advertised to the general public. It's as far from a town hall meeting as really you can possibly get.
Yeah. It's well known that since Gardner had a few town halls in 2017 that went very, very badly for him, that he has been very careful about scripting his public events. He shows up with either no notice to a place hoping that it's not possible for the dreaded left to converge their nefarious forces upon him to ask him a question, or he goes to a private setting where members of the general public simply aren't allowed to go, whether it's a group of employees
or
a
don't know what
civic group.
happened.
Yeah, and there's no advance notice or insufficient advance notice. The whole thing is designed to impede public participation, public engagement with Cory Gardner, not to facilitate it. And he knows this. Look, everybody knows this.
Right. But it is telling that he doesn't have a better answer.
No, I think he just intends to limp his way through on really bad answers.
Absolutely. What else do we have?
Final one for this week. Panel, is this an answer?
When the last time we talked, I asked you a question that was seen by millions of people around the country. I'm going to ask it again. Do you believe it's appropriate for the President of the United States to ask a foreign leader to investigate a political rival? Yes or no?
That wasn't the question that we had last night or that we had in impeachment. What we had was whether or not a president has the ability to investigate how taxpayer dollars are being spent. That's the question. And I think that's what we have to be concerned about. And if you look at the question of whether or not we would remove a duly elected president for a policy difference, I just don't think we can do that.
So clearly not answering that question. Is that?
Well, I did answer the question about impeachment. And I think that's what this impeachment has been about all along.
Not an answer.
Not an answer. I mean, how can we seriously be 4 months after that disastrous interview in October, and he still has no better answer than that? I'm just gobsmacked. I mean,
I don't understand why at this point he doesn't just say, no, well, actually he did. In a separate interview, he did say that it wasn't appropriate and that, and he claimed that he had
already answered that at some point.
That he'd supported election transparency or something in the past.
See, I remember him saying, I've already answered that question a few times when it's been put to him, even though, he didn't. He never did.
So later on, Joe St. George says, will this allow you to ask a foreign leader to investigate John Hickenlooper, who may be his opponent, in November? And Gardner says, no, look, foreign interference in our elections is absolutely wrong. Anytime, any place, anywhere. What?
Well, I guess he was able to say that in that setting, but just not in any other setting. Not in any setting where Trump might hear.
I don't understand. Just say it. It doesn't make sense to me from a strategic political perspective why at this point he's already gone to bat and backed up the president and voted to acquit him. What are you still worried about here?
I don't know. Maybe he just wants to avoid another such soundbite, another embarrassing moment on camera. I mean, he was so uptight after Manu Raju got him with the elevator doors closing a couple of weeks ago. And then the next person said, I don't want you to videotape me because last time they really embarrassed me with the elevator. So, I mean, he's very self-conscious about all of this. And I think that he's much more lucid about the negative impact of some of these interviews than we maybe even give him credit for. He just doesn't have any choice in the matter.
It really is gibberish, though. I mean, just that answer to Joe St. George earlier where he says, that wasn't a question.
Well, I know.
That wasn't the question.
Come on. Of course it was a question. You just got asked the damn question.
Now, part of why Gardner is, as we've discussed, Gardner is so worried about, for reasons that we don't totally agree with, but worried about Trump's support among Republicans in Colorado. We saw a good case of this in a separate story. There was a Republican vacancy in House District 38 down in Arapahoe County. A story that came out from coloradopolitics.com, Michael Carlick. He went to this vacancy committee meeting, and it was, the things he quoted people saying were pretty amazing to me.
Pretty wild, yeah.
This was State Representative Susan Beckman, you remember she ran unsuccessfully for state party chair. She had resigned a couple of weeks ago because she's taking a job in the Trump administration.
Right.
Back in 2018, she barely won re-election, 374 total votes.
And that was much, much tighter than 2016.
Much tighter than 2016. So where that would lead me to go, were I a person on the Republican Party saying, boy, I sure hope we can keep this seat, is that we don't want to go further right.
But
that's
it looks
not what
like they did. Yeah. There's a new representative in House District 38. His name is Richard Champion, and he is the mayor of Columbine Valley. Now, if you don't know what Columbine Valley is, it's a little tiny enclave of about 1,400 people, surrounded mostly by Littleton, and it was actually incorporated by members of the Columbine Valley Country Club. And it's 95% white.
I grew up.
Income is extremely high there.
I grew up in South Jeffco. I swear to you, I did not know Columbine Valley was a town until today. I literally had no idea it existed. But
no, it's right. And actually, I think there's more of a story there. Some of these little tiny high-income enclaves that are kind of built to protect rich folks from having to care about municipal problems outside of their boundaries. That's a whole other story. But the point is that this is not really what I would call a representative community of anything other than rich white Republicans.
And here's what several Republicans were quoted in this story for ColoradoPolitics.com, talking about what it is that they wanted in their replacement representative. Listen to a couple of these quotes. I want a representative that's not going to be following the rules of Lenin.
The rules of Lenin.
Rules of Lenin.
Because that's what they do in Denver.
Someone else says, I just know that I wish Polis would drop dead and we'd have good Republicans.
What does that mean? Does that mean that if Polis were to drop dead, then we'd have better Republicans?
Then Walker Stapleton somehow becomes governor?
It's kind of weird. I don't know exactly what they mean.
Somebody else says, I'm sick to death of the idiots downtown that are attacking our oil and gas industry. They're fools. They don't know what they're talking about. Fossil fuels are not going anywhere. They clearly want a guy, a candidate who stands with Trump.
Yeah, a red meat shoveler.
Richard Champion was the only candidate apparently to verbalize that he is fully behind Trump. And there was another voter quoted here saying that was what attracted them to supporting him, because there was a candidate who I think a lot of people thought would win down there. Her name is Brenda Stokes, who says she's going to challenge Champion in a Republican primary anyway. So this is all turning out really well for them.
And then she will be the champion, my friends.
That's right. That's right. And that pun will continue forever.
Yeah, I'm going to milk that.
There was somebody else quoted in this story that I thought it was interesting, that in talking about Champion's victory, they said, I was frankly very startled. I was surprised it went the way it did. There must be a message in that somewhere. There is.
Maybe the message was nominate a fringe guy who's going to lose. I mean, really, if this guy turns out to be as hard right a candidate as this article portrays him as, and if that was really the selection criteria for the vacancy committee, then yeah, they just appointed a guy who's going to shine brightly for a few months and lose.
Absolutely going to lose. And interestingly enough, he refused to talk to reporters after the vacancy committee.
Yeah. Well, you know, they don't believe in the liberal media. He probably has that bumper sticker on the back of his truck, so.
Wait, do you not have an answer for why you wanted to be? Why did you want to be appointed to this vacancy? I don't know.
Well, you know, there's only so much you can do as the mayor of Country Club Town. So,
really though. I mean, it's stunning to me that this is the direction they're going, even after getting slaughtered in 2018 by Democrats.
Yeah.
They're not moving more to the middle. They're moving more to the right.
I think that we knew that when all of those recalls tanked in 2019.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the Democratic presidential race. The Iowa results are almost final, mostly final. Looks like Mayor Pete Buttigieg ended up with the most delegates over Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. Sanders ended up with the popular vote victory, which is symbolic only.
God, you know, why does that happen in Iowa? Why can't we just have the popular vote decide stuff? Even in Iowa, the popular vote winner gets fewer delegates. What the hell is that?
Yeah,
I'm sure there's a good reason. I didn't sit there doing the math worksheets that apparently half the delegates in Iowa screwed up anyway.
Sanders' campaign is calling for a recanvass of several districts in Iowa. So
AP has announced that they just aren't going to call the thing.
right. So what we're looking at is New Hampshire is going to vote in the first in the nation presidential primary on Tuesday. They might have results before Iowa does.
Yeah. And honestly, given the uncertainty and all of the, humiliating problems that they've had trying to count the caucus there in Iowa, New Hampshire is going to give us our first real look at this race. I mean, it's just the way it is. They awarded some delegates, but really the results have given no one anything to brag about.
And the key to me was that nobody could use that. Traditionally, what made Iowa so important, I thought, was that candidates who came out of Iowa could say, look what I did. I'm the person that you should support now.
Right.
Buttigieg couldn't do that. Sanders couldn't do that because nobody really knew. And by the time the results were slowly trickling in on over the weekend, people didn't care anymore.
No, that's right. Mayor Pete invested a lot in Iowa, too. He really, really needed like a standout win.
And Sanders did, too.
And that's right. And Sanders really needed the win in Iowa. Frankly, the results weren't, I mean, they both performed well, but they weren't the best case for either of them.
No, I don't think so. And national polls, there's a new Quinnipiac University poll out showing that Bernie Sanders is kind of in the driver's seat nationally for the Democratic nomination. He's probably the favorite in New Hampshire, I would think. That's his part of the country.
Yeah, that's right.
What else do you expect to happen there? I mean, the big thing I'm looking at, there are two things. How does Elizabeth Warren do? Can she come in about second and be a close second and really have some springboard going into non-white voting states? And is Biden done? If he comes in fourth in New Hampshire after he finished fourth in Iowa?
Yeah. Well, remember that Biden is counting on his two firewall states, which are Nevada and South Carolina. And these are states that have a different electoral makeup for the Democratic primary. And he's hoping on more support from African-American voters in South Carolina, Hispanic voters in Nevada. These are traditional strongholds for Biden. And I mean, he's proven very good at reaching out to these folks. Biden is the prohibitive favorite right now in South Carolina. So if Bernie's momentum is going to get blunted after New Hampshire, that's where it's going to happen.
Potentially. Although the argument is that if Biden doesn't do well in New Hampshire, does that firewall start to disintegrate?
Oh, it's entirely possible. Yeah. And I mean, if everybody's talking about a disappointing showing for Biden coming out of New Hampshire, that really puts his back up against the wall in these other states, where if he does not win strongly, he's going to be out.
Do you think Buttigieg needs to perform very well in New Hampshire, or do you think he can sort of skip it?
No. Buttigieg has to outperform in every single contest going forward, or he's going to very quickly lose momentum.
You think?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely, I do. I mean, he's got real staying power issues. He's been a very good, charismatic candidate. He's managed to turn people out in the short run. He did perform very well in Iowa. It's down the stretch, and it's in these big states that were, including Colorado, on Super Tuesday. And it's South Carolina is not going to be good to Buttigieg. You know, these are all places where he has the chance of going from a wonderkin that everybody's enthralled with to what people more expect, which is for him to flame out here at some point.
Right. The other person looking at New Hampshire as a last stand, Colorado Senator Michael Bennet, who is still an actual candidate for president, he tells MSNBC that he thinks he must finish in the top 3 or 4 in New Hampshire.
And mind you, there's not a single poll that says that's where he's going to end up.
Michael Bennet finished behind other in Iowa.
I tell you, here's the thing. Bennett really has, by all accounts, been working super hard in New Hampshire. He's put all his eggs in the New Hampshire basket, and he's gotten a lot of good press from it, and really seems to have endeared himself to a lot of folks. It just hasn't translated.
It seems completely implausible to me that he could finish in the top 4.
No, I just don't see it. And I think that by his own reckoning, that's going to be the end of his campaign. Along the way, though, I do feel like Bennett has not hurt himself. He's been out there kind of doggedly pushing his message. And he's not going to be president.
No, but I don't think he's hurt himself, but I don't know what he's accomplished for himself either, really. I mean,
I think that he's more visible for potential cabinet appointment now.
That's probably true.
Yeah.
And that was, if we're being fair, probably his initial goal this whole time.
Yeah. And, the general name ID improvement that comes along with being a presidential candidate, being in those first couple of debates, it was worth it.
I think he may stick around one way or the other for Colorado. ballots are going out this week in our state for the Super Tuesday primary on March 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
How do you feel about how that's going to go in Colorado? I don't know that Colorado is that important in determining which candidate becomes a Democratic nominee.
It's going to be a big bragging
But-
rights competition. All of these individual smaller states in Super Tuesday still factor because people want to say, yeah, I won that state. I won Colorado. Right. And I mean, that's why they're all coming out. It's a fiercely competitive race right now. I do think that Sanders has probably got the advantage.
Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, from what we've seen, appear to have the more robust campaign infrastructures in Colorado. Biden has done a lot less. Buttigieg has come through the state, but his operation doesn't seem to be as robust as anyone else's here. Do you think it really is just Warren or Sanders in Colorado?
I think that they're the two most competitive. What's interesting, though, and I mean, we're seeing this in the polling in New Hampshire as they get ready to vote there, is that Sanders appears to be pulling votes from Warren as Sanders consolidates his support. Looks like Warren's sagging in the polls is accelerating. So that would tell me that, yeah, it is advantage Sanders. I mean, Biden could actually do all right here, but I do think it is a Sanders-Warren race.
Yeah, I think just from the standpoint of which campaigns have invested significant resources and staff time here, it's really only been Sanders and Warren.
Yep.
And that tells you something about how all the candidates have viewed the race in Colorado up to this point.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Remember, if you are a 17-year-old in Colorado, you can vote in the presidential primary on March 3rd as long as you turn 18 before November 3rd, 2020. So if you're not registered, please get out and do that and cast your ballot and make your choice.
A lot of campaigns out there are thinking in terms of Super Tuesday in a traditional election. With mail ballots already going out, you're going to have votes coming back into the primary as soon as the end of the week. That should put campaigns on notice that they really do need to be winning people over right now. There's no waiting until Super Tuesday for these votes.
What do you think about Michael Bloomberg? Does he have a chance in Colorado?
Well, Michael Bloomberg is spending an unprecedented amount of money. He has hired up huge numbers of the very best political staffers in the state of Colorado. Not all of them, of course. Some people were on other campaigns, but he has really bought up an incredible array of talent. So, yes, what we're seeing is billionaires looking to brute force their way into the election.
Part of me, there's obviously the concern that you've got another billionaire trying to buy his way into the election. On the other hand, he's committed to spending a great deal of money in order to defeat Trump. And I think there are a lot of voters, and frankly, I would almost include myself among them, who are getting to the point where it's like, as long as it's not Trump, I'm for whoever.
Ultimately, I think that's where a majority of Americans would land if they have to make that choice. Yes. And look, Bloomberg represents a very different equation for voters than a traditional progressive Democratic candidate. This guy used to be a Republican. He's been a supporter of very controversial policies like the stop and frisk policy in New York City.
He's also been very, very good on the progressive side on issues like gun violence.
Yes, that's true. And he spent a huge amount of money helping Democrats win the House in 2018. There's no question that these are bona fides for him. I will say that for anybody out there who has already kind of found a preference for a candidate in the Democratic primary, Bloomberg's actions are kind of a slap in the face. It's kind of a vote of no confidence on an ongoing basis to all the other candidates that are in the race.
Although this is purely anecdotal evidence. It's nothing scientific by any means, but the only candidate that anybody really asks me about that isn't involved, friends of mine that are not involved in politics, is Bloomberg.
Yeah. Well, Bloomberg is absolutely saturating every available advertising medium. You cannot watch a YouTube video. You cannot watch Hulu.
Right.
You cannot watch anything without seeing Bloomberg ads right now. Absolute saturation level to an extent that, here again, it's unprecedented. Nobody has ran a campaign like this. Nobody has shoveled so much money so early into a presidential race.
I don't think it's out of the possibility that Bloomberg could finish third in Colorado. I don't know they could do higher.
It would be a remarkable development.
I think that's probably the ceiling.
quite frankly, you've got Trump, who brute forced his way in and took control of the Republican Party in 2016. What will happen to the Democrats if something similar? All of the party organization and months of organizing by all of these candidates is suddenly upended by a billionaire who can just spend, his way into dominance.
Well, though, that is a little different, though, because Trump didn't spend that much of his own money.
He spent some, but he also had a lot of. That's right. And Bloomberg is refusing to take anybody's money.
Right. So it is a little different in that sense. That it's like I said, I do appreciate from Bloomberg the idea that if you're a billionaire and you're going to run for president, at least be all in.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And he's all in.
I mean, to an extent that I think shocked even people who heard the numbers before. I mean, to see this actually playing out, to see this kind of money being spent, it's extraordinary. And I mean, it's going to be kind of an interesting test to see what kind of measurable effect it has, how much it's able to change minds that were already moving towards much more traditional candidates.
Right. The Get More Smarter podcast is a production of ColoradoPolls.com and ProgressNow Colorado. Your hosts are me, Jason Bane, and Alan Franklin most of the time, some of the time, when Ian Silveri's not here, and he's not. Ethan Black engineers and produces our show. The phenomenal Breakmaster Cylinder made our theme music. We record weekly in the basement of the Alliance Center in what seems to be endlessly snowy downtown Denver. Subscribe on Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Drop us an email at angryrants@getmoresmarter.com.